John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. A lot of NFL news as well that we'll get into. Cowboys lose again last night to the Giants. We also have Jeff Fisher fired and all sorts of other great NFL nuggets today. But let's start off with what happened yesterday, John. Kind of the final nail in the Eagles' coffin, eliminated from playoff contention. But they had a shot again late in that game. So the question we kind of opened the show off up with today has to do with, how do you surmise that they have been in all these games? Is it they have talent and Doug is just holding them back, or B, are they lacking talent but Doug has actually done a pretty good job?
Well, I'm in the latter. I think Doug has done a pretty good job in some difficult circumstances. If you think about how he got this job, going all the way back to when the whole Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz nonsense started in the offseason, where Sam was upset, asking to be traded. And then everything settled down from there. Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt, and they pull off the trade 8 days before the regular season. I always rewind to that point because I try to remind people what your expectations were or what they should have been when you're given a rookie head coach and saying, okay, scrap what you've been doing the entire summer. You got 8 days to get ready for the season with a rookie quarterback who's barely had a preseason. And I wasn't the only one that predicted 6 wins. A lot of people predicted less. There isn't a ton of talent on this team at certain positions, and we all know what they are. Mainly skill position, but also cornerback on the defensive side. And they're right where they should be. Unfortunately, they got there in sort of different circumstances than expected because they had such a good start, and that sort of skewed expectations. And now it's a disappointment. But I think if you look at it realistically, there was a lot of positive to come out of that game yesterday. Number one, they were so banged up and still had a chance to win it in the end. And even more importantly than that was that Carson Wentz looked like a future star quarterback again. He had a tremendous football game. So I think there's a couple of different prisms you could look at it. Obviously, you're disappointed if you wanted to make the playoffs, but that was unrealistic to begin with. And this was a rebuilding year with a rookie quarterback, and from that standpoint, I think most of it has been a success.
John, the Eagles have lost 4 in a row, 8 of 10 after that 3-0 start. Do they have a losing culture?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful. I often talk about a losing culture. Mike and I used to have it out with the Sixers. I believe it's real. I believe you should be concerned when you start losing close games because it can become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. So it's something to certainly keep an eye on. I don't sense in that building that they believe they're a losing organization or the players believe that. So I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, but at some point, yeah, I mean, you got to start winning some close games.
Yeah, I haven't won a playoff game since 2008, and the one common denominator is Jeffrey and Howie, right? I mean, those two guys. And so is this team lacking in the talent evaluation area, or is it something more simple? Like, I was having this discussion with a guy I went to high school with last night, and, it's just one of these things where it's like, I'm sick of this every year. It's the same old thing, yada, yada. And it's Howie has to go. Jeffrey's got to sell the team. Is it that common denominator, do you find, or is it as simple as what I would say? Well, you know what? The common theme here is they traded McNabb in 2009. They haven't won since because they haven't found a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have a quarterback to win in this league consistently. You can have some up years if you have a sort of a good defense and build that way and maybe have a 10-win season and make the playoffs, but you're not going to do it consistently unless you have a top-tier quarterback. That's when you see those teams that make the playoffs every season. They have one thing in common, and they haven't had a franchise quarterback since Donovan left. And hopefully they have the next one. I believe they do, but, it still needs to be proven on the field. And that alone should have the fan base a little bit excited because we've seen, I think, enough from Carson Wentz to at least say he's got a very, very good chance of being the long-term starter for this team. But, hey, Jeffrey Lurie made a huge mistake when he gave this team over to Chip Kelly. And it's proven. It's done. And he pushed the rewind button to go back how it was the way before. But that 12 months destroyed this organization from a talent standpoint. And it was going to take more than one off season to reboot it. And I think they got off to a very, very good start once Howie retook the reins. But there's still work to be done. And we all know the positions they have to sort of buttress. And it's not easy. I mean, we all know, you saw it again with Deshaun Jackson yesterday. Sort of changes the game. And you just see him track the football in the air and the home run ability down the football field. And then you look at the other side, and there's just not a receiver that can do that on this team. And there hasn't been since he left.
John?
Sure.
Yeah, does having Carson Wentz, since you're talking about Carson Wentz a little bit too, does that speed up the process? Are they closer than maybe people think because they have Carson Wentz?
Well, I think everybody's closer than you think in the NFL because the teams are so close talent-wise, and even the bad teams have really, really good players. Look at Jacksonville, for instance. I mean, that's a terrible team, a 2-win team. If they get the right coach and they get the right plan going forward, that's a team I could see winning 9-10 games next year. That's how quickly things can change in this league because the talent is so close, and basically it's 4 or 5 players that make a really good team really good, and the vast majority of the league is mediocre. And then sort of you have the really bad teams. And generally, with the exception of Cleveland, because we all know what they're doing, but generally it's sort of the injuries. Talk about that losing culture, Pete. The snowball starts going down the wrong side of the hill, and things go in a different direction. But you can change it very, very quickly in this league. And if the Eagles get a wide receiver and get a cornerback, you're talking about 2 players. They could go from 5-6 wins, whatever they're going to have this season, to 10 by next year.
Right. Well, no, and we see it. We see it with a couple teams, John. Dallas 4-12 last year. Now injuries, big problem. Romo hurt, and they go down the toilet. But this year, Romo's not back, and yet they're still winning because they added some pieces. The running back, Des Bryant, has been healthier this year. Teams go down the toilet and right back pretty quickly. The problem with this Eagles team, I think people are starting to get in that feel is, okay, they haven't really they haven't made the playoffs in 3 seasons, and even when they won the 10 games a couple of years ago, many people didn't even think that team was very good, right? I mean, the Kelly team that went 10-6 and missed the playoffs, that team was kind of an average feeling team too. So that's where it comes back to the talent evaluation on this team. We just went over the drafts from 2008 up. I mean, they've got like 10 guys. Like in that many drafts, they got like 10 players. That's just not good.
No, it hasn't been good. And they do have to do a better job. And you've seen kind of this year, and I think they're doing a better job sort of getting the younger players some reps and sort of getting their feet wet And that's improvement because, I think people assume it's picking the right player. A lot of it is player development. And once you get the player in your system, is Isaac Seumalo going to turn into a long-term starter in this league? Is Big V going to turn into a long-time starter? I don't know. But there are certain systems that will do a better job developing those players than others. I think that's where the Eagles have failed more than anywhere else. And the second is, and Jeffrey Lurie deserves a lot of the blame. There's no question for it. They made a mistake. I don't think there's any question the shelf life was expired on Andy Reid in Philadelphia. They had to move on from Andy as a coach, even though he's a very good coach. You see what he's doing in Kansas City. They made the wrong decision. They brought in the wrong guy. They set this organization back years. And they weren't the only one that was fooled by Chip Kelly. A lot of teams in this league thought he was going to be a great coach in this league. He's not. And his system doesn't work in this league. So they made a very, very big mistake. And you see it in other cities. When you hire the wrong coach, hey, you're going to set yourself back 4 or 5 years minimum.
Now that you've seen some sample size, is Doug still the right choice, though, for the Eagles right now? Because I've been arguing with Mike all day that I think he's in over his head. But is he still the right choice in your mind?
Well, I think there's a chance he's the right choice. I haven't seen anything to say he's going to be a failure. Look, the nature of the NFL is obviously because there's only one game a week and there's only 16 games a year, they're magnified to a ludicrous degree. And every mistake is we talk about it constantly, we go over it, and every coach deals with that. Doug is no different. But you take an Andy Reid, for instance, and I know a lot of people in Philadelphia and the surrounding area don't like Andy, but it's tough to argue with a success. And if he ever does get a Super Bowl in Kansas City, you're talking about a Hall of Fame coach. That's how good he was when he was here. And he still makes mistakes. We talk about the time management all the time. It's not as easy.
John, name a coach in this league. Name a coach in this league who doesn't make mistakes. I mean, even if Belichick's number one, I don't know who number two is, but number two makes his fair share of mistakes.
Well, I was talking to Josh before I came on, and Jeff Fisher got fired today after becoming the losingest coach in NFL history. And I asked Josh, who now that Fisher's gone, who's the losingest coach in the NFL? And the answer is Bill Belichick. The point. So there's a couple things to that. He's been around a very, very long time, and that's generally who gets to be amongst the losingest coaches.
By the way, I'm reading your tweet from an hour ago. He says, "If I'm the Rams, I already called Jim Harbaugh, and if I'm Harbaugh, I already hung up."
That's great.
But I think the Rams will. I think there's a very good chance that Jim Harbaugh will be the next coach of the Rams. But anyway, the point, all coaches make mistakes, and you talk about the challenges, and I see it in the press box. I mean, you have generally when you have these bang bang plays, obviously teams are smart enough to try to get up to the line of scrimmage. And they want to run the play as quickly as possible. And you got to make your decision right there. And then you got media people in the press box watching the replay 15 times after the challenge flag has already been thrown. Why did he do that? Like he's got 10 minutes in between the commercial to make a decision. It's just not realistic to expect perfection. And I'll just say the Eagles are better off with this coach than what they were with the last coach. That's no guarantee of success, but I've seen enough positives to say he's got a chance.
Well, I know what the challenge is specifically. I was in the stands yesterday, John, and the fans were upset that he didn't throw the challenge flag, which Mike came on and said it's a good thing he didn't. He would have lost, but then they wanted him to throw it when He did eventually throw the flag, and they were all cheering, gave him the Bronx cheer, sort of. I will also, John, how about today when he comes out and says that he didn't realize Matt Tobin was injured? What's he looking at?
Well, yeah, again, you're talking about the guts of the game. You're talking about a potential game-winning drive. There's 40 seconds between plays. He gets hurt on the play before, and, that's Matt Tobin's mentality. He also realizes how behind the eight ball the Eagles were as far as the offensive line with the Barrett Brooks illness again. Barber's already out.
Brandon
They're
Brooks.
down to
Brandon
the fourth
Brooks.
right tackle. Sorry.
Although Barrett told us earlier that if he was in shape, he could do a better job.
Barrett was on the show, yeah.
If he could do a better job than Tobin did.
Well, and maybe he's right, but remember, Matt Tobin is the fourth right tackle. So, I mean, that's pretty difficult. You see what happened in Minnesota when they lost all their tackles. There are very few teams in this league that can go down to their fourth right tackle and say he's going to be successful. And you got to give Matt Tobin credit for trying to stay in there because he knew the situation. And he's trying to play with a sprained MCL, it turns out to be. And he's probably going to be out for the rest of the season. Just one of those things. I remember a similar situation in the San Diego game where they lost their left tackle in the potential game-winning drive, and they had to throw a guy out there that just couldn't block anybody, and Phillip Rivers got sacked, fumbled, lose the game. That's just bad luck.
John, a rough day for the team overall. Dorenbos done for the year. Right, we got a litany of injuries that have happened, so they need a new long snapper. That's evident because yesterday that was hilarious watching guys on the sideline, trying to chuck the ball between their legs yesterday. You saw Michael Kendricks.
I've been covering this team, covering this league for 20 years or so, and I never remembered seeing a team down to its third long snapper. I've seen it. Backup long snappers happens on occasion. I always say Jared Allen when I covered the Vikings, he was the best backup long snapper in history. He was so good at it, but very few teams can lose their long snapper. And, that's one of those positions. You don't have a backup. Nobody thinks about it because generally those guys are so good at it, you don't even notice them. And all of a sudden, Dorenbos gets hurt, and the whole world crashes
in
down.
The game that he was honored with Harold Carmichael for being the longest tenured Eagle, so I guess he's not going to break that record.
No, so Harold gets to stay in the record book, but he's tied, unfortunately, for John to set the break the record next week. So that's some bad luck. And you had Selleck have the bad snap, and then he gets hurt. And then all heck breaks loose, and you have tryouts on the sideline.
Yeah, there was Michael Kendricks. Who was the other special teams guy? What's his name?
Brayman.
Yeah,
Brian Brayman.
So what's?
Now, I have seen at practice. I've seen Kendricks and Burton do a couple long snaps in practice on a few different occasions this season. So it was more of a warm up than a tryout because those are the guys who.
Right. Now Burton had said he did it in Pop Warner, and he had done it at Florida a little bit, like in like camp, but never like in a game situation. You got Sproles with the hit, concussion. Smallwood looks like he's done for the year. Kenyon Barner, did he get squeezed yesterday because Brooks was out? Why wasn't Barber activated yesterday?
Barner, yeah, he got squeezed because Ryan Matthews is back, but it was still a little bit of a surprise because he that was the first time he scratched all season, and just from the fact that he's been so effective on kickoff returns since Josh Huff left, he's averaging over 31 yards a kickoff return. I was a little surprised the Eagles sat him down, but they wanted to get a look at Stephen Means on the defensive line. They needed a spot for him, and I think a lot of that had to do with just how poorly Connor Barwin played against Washington the last time, and they kind of realized they needed a few reinforcements now that Trent Williams was back on the Redskins.
We'll have more from John on the NFL. Week 14 will be officially in the books after tonight. He'll be in studio with us tomorrow. So much to go over. Dallas loses again. What's to say about the Giants? I know people were clamoring to hear from you today because we've been critical of the Giants. They got a win last night in a game that was not the most aesthetically pleasing game to watch. But we'll have plenty more on that game. Week 14 in the books. The NFL, Fisher fired. Tomorrow, John's in studio with us here on The Bash. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys.